Everyone is chasing something. But what if getting it ruins you? This trail follows an Irish myth. A war sparked by pride and ended in destruction. All for a bull. Today I'm walking the Tain Way to see what an ancient story can teach us about ambition, ego, and what it really costs to win.
You know, it's easy to feel sometimes like you're falling behind. Everyone else is promoting their content on social media or getting promoted at work. And it's easy within that to feel like you're not enough, that you need to do something to prove yourself. And that's where our story begins today. Not in a battlefield, not on social media, not in a corporate office, but in a bed 2,000 years ago.
In the story of the Tain Bo Cuilnge, Queen Medb of Connacht and her husband Ailill lay in their royal bed, taking inventory of a marriage. Gold matched gold, silver met silver, every treasure balanced, until they reached their greatest wealth. Their herds of cattle. Because among Ailill's herds stood Fionn-Vonach, the white-horned bull, a beast so magnificent and so valuable that nothing in Medb's herds could match him. And once he'd been hers, born to her herd, he'd refused a woman's ownership, so he joined Ailill's cattle instead. She lay there, calculating what might equal him. Only one beast in all Ireland, Dún Cuilnge, the brown bull of Cooley. Darker, fiercer, grazing on these hills here in distant Ulster.
So Medb is one bull short, and not short of survival or comfort, but of status. And the pursuit of that status is going to unwillingly cost thousands of lives. I say unknowingly because there's a moment in every pursuit where things feel reasonable. You don't feel like you're demanding anything, you're just looking for what seems fair. That's where I was, and Medb, she started there too.
Medb chose diplomacy first by sending messengers through these mountains to the bull's owner, Dara, with an offer. 1 year's loan of the bull. In return, 50 yearling heifers, a tract of land, a chariot worth 21 slaves, and the friendly thighs of Medb herself. Dara said yes, and the deal is struck. That night, Medb's envoys drank with their hosts, but wine loosens tongues. One of them boasted that if Dara had refused the offer, they'd have just taken the bull anyway. Word reaches Dara, trust is broken, and he calls the deal off. So Medb does what pride often does. She decides to take Dún Cuilnge, the brown bull of Cooley, by force. When Maeve's army crossed into Ulster, they met no resistance. Every defending warrior lay writhing, struck down by an ancient curse, the labour pains of Macha, a goddess wronged by Ulstermen generations ago. Her revenge was precise. In their hour of greatest need, Ulster's fighters would suffer as she had in childbirth. But some curses have loopholes. One defender remained standing. 17 years old, too young to be bound by the spell when it was cast. His name was Setanta, though most know him by another name.
Cuchulainn, or the Hound of Cullen, and his boy, this teenager, would hold off an entire army alone by himself in these hills and valleys.
Cuchulainn stood alone, so he fought alone. He challenged Maeve's army to single combat, and they agreed, one warrior per day to face the boy from Ulster. And every day he won, duel after duel, champion after champion. He cut them down with skill, fury, and something close to madness.
Because it wasn't just a battle anymore. It had turned into a bit of a performance. And I know that place when you stop asking if it's fair and you just accept that you're the one who has to do it. You take the shift, you step up when others don't. I told myself I was being noble, but really I think I was substituting the search for meaning with solace.
Eventually, Connacht sent their finest champion, Ferdia, Cuchulainn's foster brother and his closest friend. They had trained together and fought side by side. But now they are enemies, one fighting for Ulster, the other for Connacht. They battled for 3 days, shield to shield, blow for blow, each refusing to yield, each knowing how the story would end, because there was only ever going to be one survivor. On the third day, Cuchulainn fatally wounded Ferdia. He drove the Gaea Bolga, a terrible barbed spear, through his foster brother's body. And when Ferdia fell, Cuchulainn carried him across the ford to die on Ulster's side with honour. Then he collapsed beside the body and wept.
And something broke inside Cuchulainn that day. The boy who held an army at bay couldn't hold back his grief, lamenting his lost friends in a long, beautiful poem, emotionally devastated and physically wounded from 3 days of brutal hand-to-hand combat in service of his province.
Unknown to Cuchulainn though, Maeve's forces had found their moment. One of her scouts slipped through with 24 warriors. They found Tain Bo Cuilnge grazing in a hidden valley. The brown bull, the entire reason for this war, was theirs. Word reached Maeve at sunset. The thing she'd marched an army for, the prize that would make her equal to her husband. It was now being driven west to Connacht as they made camp. Maeve had won.
But there was no celebration, no triumph. Her army was bleeding. Her best champion was dead. Even if she's gotten what she came for, victory just tasted like ash. The bull bellowed somewhere in the darkness, but nobody was listening because they were busy counting their dead.
So there's Maeve with her prize finally captured. But this war won't stop. It's taken on a momentum of its own now. The Morrigan, a goddess of war and death, starts circling. First, she comes to Cuchulainn as a beautiful woman, but he rejects her. So she attacks him again and again, taking the shape of animals mid-fight. He wounds her every time, never really knowing who she is. And that's what happens when your pursuit is based on ego. It attracts darker things that feed on the chaos. And in Maeve's own camp, Fergus, her best general and an Ulster exile, he's watching his own homeland burn. But for what? For a bull that they've already caught? The soldiers are starting to whisper about the Queen who traded their lives for such a ridiculous price. Nobody sleeps well anymore. They can feel something coming. And this war is just getting hungry for more.
After 3 days of weeping over Ferdia, Cuchulainn couldn't rise, his wounds finally catching up with him. That's when his father appeared, Lugh, the god of light and skill. For 3 days and 3 nights, Lugh worked his healing magic while Cuchulainn slept. But wars don't pause for healing. And while he recovered, the Mochrid, the young boys of Ulster, came to fight. The same ones he trained with as a child, now calling themselves warriors. And when Cuchulainn woke, it wasn't to the clash of steel, but to silence. And he went looking and found them. 150 boys scattered across the fields like broken toys. And inside him, something snapped. They say his body twisted inside its skin. He became something that wasn't human anymore. Just rage given form. Riastrad in Irish. He killed 600 men that day and built walls from their bodies. But it didn't bring back one single boy. But one by one at first, then en masse, Macha's debilitating curse lifted like morning mist. For 9 long days Ulster had lain silent, its warriors doubled over in phantom labour pains, helpless as their land burned. But now the spell was broken. All at once, across Ulster, men rose from their beds, champions stumbled from their huts. Every sword that had lain idle was lifted. Every shield that had gathered dust was raised. The Kest 9 then, the 9 days' debility, was finally over. King Conifer mac Nessa gathered his forces. From every corner of the province they came, old fighters, young champions, battle-worn heroes. Men who had cursed their own weakness now gripped weapons with white-knuckle fury. They were awake, they were angry, and now they were ready for battle.
It's almost anticlimactic, isn't it? After all that suffering, all that single-handed defence, now Ulster shows up, like backup arriving after the crisis is over, after all the boys are dead, and after Cuchulainn has already broken himself, holding the line.
But Fergus MacRoish saw the Ulstermen coming. Once the king of Ulster, and now Maeve's chief general, he stood against his former subjects. He led her army through every ford and forest of his own homeland. But he had made a promise to Cuchulainn. When they met on the battlefield, he would yield. The armies crashed together at Gairoch and Ilgarach. Thousands against thousands. What had been single combat became slaughter. And in the chaos, nobody noticed that the prize, the brown bull, was already gone, already heading west. Ulster drove them back, battle after battle and ford after ford, with Maeve's alliance crumbling. The invasion that had lasted months ended in days. But she still had the bull.
And here's the thing about winning. Sometimes you win the battle, but you lose the war. Ulster defended their land, they avenged their dead, and they proved their strength. But the brown bull was already in Connacht, already beyond recovery. All those deaths and all that suffering. But for what?
In the chaos, Cuchulainn came upon Maeve, alone and vulnerable. He could have killed her, ending the war in a single stroke. But he didn't. He spared her, out of honour, or maybe just a recognition that no death would undo what had already been lost. She returned to Connacht, victory secured. But victories like this never last long. When Dún Cuilnge arrived in Cruachan, he found his rival waiting. Fionn Bheannach, the white-horned bull who'd started it all. And here is where the myth shows its teeth. They knew each other instantly. They weren't just animals. They were ancient enemies, bulls who'd been men and then gods and then beasts. Reborn again and again just to fight each other. For a day and night they fought, tearing their way across Ireland. When dawn came, only Dún Cuilnge stood, but Fionn Bheannach's horn had pierced his heart. The brown bull, grievously injured, wandered home to Ulster, carrying pieces of his enemy on his horns. And when he finally reached his own land, he bellowed once and died. 2 bulls, thousands dead, and in the end, nothing. She got the bull, and he won the battles. But still, they lost everything. The very things they fought over destroyed each other. Even the prize couldn't survive the pursuit. That's the price of wars fought over pride. I think Maeve's story still resonates a lot. How she lay in bed that night, measuring herself against someone else's success. How that gap, that one missing thing, became everything. And we've all been there, comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, feeling like you need to chase harder. And Cuchulainn, he held the line alone, always saying yes, always delivering, always sacrificing, and in the end, it left him broken. I still haven't gotten what I'm chasing. Not yet. But maybe that's why I came here, to remember this old story before I write my own.